The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. I am joining you remotely today from Western Massachusetts. I'm speaking at the University of Massachusetts Amherst today, and also avoiding Thanksgiving traffic, I guess, kind of by default. So that's a good thing. Pat, how was vegan Thanksgiving?
Vegan Thanksgiving was excellent. Thank you for asking. Great family gathering, I would say, complete with some shepherd's pie. I had shepherd's pie for dinner.
Uh-huh. And was it a lentil-based vegan shepherd's pie, or was it
Yes.
tofu-based?
It was lentil-based with some mashed potatoes, some carrots, some kale, of course. I mean, you can't have a vegan meal without kale. So
Oh,
yeah,
no.
very good time.
Absolutely. Well, that's very, very good. I had a good one too. No political discussion at the one I was at. I don't know if any politics broke out within your group.
No, I talked about Trump pardoning the turkey, though. See if
Oh.
that would go anywhere, but it didn't really.
Your material was not well received, I guess we could
I
say.
tested the waters.
All right, a lot of different news, and I'm glad that we're getting a chance to cover it. I've talked. Anytime you're looking at regime change away from an authoritarian dictator, there's always the chance that the replacement will also be an oppressor of human rights. And there are civil rights groups that are really concerned about what's going on in Zimbabwe. As we've been covering, longtime president, authoritarian dictator Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe has now been removed from power fully. He was initially taken by the Zimbabwean military. And eventually, relinquished his presidency. That's a good thing. But now there are already concerns that the replacement, Emerson Mnangagwa, might be just as bad. That might continue brutal oppression of political opposition, of dissenting voices, etc., because that's exactly what he did in 2008. He was accused of involvement in a number of killings during the 1980s, and it's horrible. And there's really no surprise. And this is one of those situations, Pat, where that I am not. The audience knows I am not an apologist for American meddling in other countries, in Africa and in South America. As I've talked about on today's program, it's been an absolute disaster. You can end up with horrible replacements when you have regime change, whether or not the United States is involved. We had concerns about this in Egypt. There have been concerns about what would happen in Syria if Bashar al-Assad were to be removed. There's no shortage of examples. And hey, this is what it is, and it is a major concern.
Yeah, and I mean, especially because it doesn't look as if the coup was over any human rights concerns. It was unclear as to if Mugabe's successor would be his longtime wife or it would be this guy who's in power now. And because you'd have to assume that Mugabe's probably in ailing health at this point, he's like 93, 94 years old, that conversation was going to come across at some point, and maybe they figured that this coup would cement this guy, what's his name again?
Mnangagwa,
as
very
his successor.
Difficult name. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't for a second think that the military removal of Mugabe was in order to specifically put Mnangagwa in place. However, it's certainly possible, if what you're alluding to is that Mugabe relinquishing may have been because he realized maybe the regime has a better shot of maintaining power if his right-hand man takes over rather than not, or something. But in any case, as always, my concern is the humanitarian situation on the ground, and there's no guarantee that it's going to improve, and that's an absolutely horrible thing.
And Mnangagwa promises that elections will take place as scheduled next year, but how often do we see authoritarian leaders just reschedule it or push it off or just declare that they need to stay in power for a little bit longer to uphold the transition?
Yeah, not only that, or set up elections that are not really fair elections, right? That's the other possibility. They do the election and then it's not actually a fair election. So I'm very interested for the people of Zimbabwe in following what it is that happens, and we'll continue to track it. Light pollution is a big problem in a lot of the United States for people who want to do stargazing. And I've mentioned, I think it came up recently on a YouTube live stream. I sometimes have talked about wanting to get a telescope, and others have said, oh, David, you should instead get astronomy binoculars. Might be a better, less expensive start and easier to use than a telescope. And of course, the problem I have is that living in Boston, there's a lot of light pollution. And there are towns in a mountain valley in Idaho around the 6,000 to 7,000 foot elevation range that have these low light pollution policies, and you can see just an incredible amount of stuff in the sky. And that it's super appealing to me, Pat. I would love it if that were possible, although I'd have to move to a pretty rural place. Good luck getting cities to turn their lights off, but I would love to be able to see more stuff in the sky when you walk around.
Yeah, it is pretty cool, and I think this would be maybe the second reason to go to Idaho behind the Idaho Potato Museum. Now, two
Sure,
reasons
of
to go.
course. Yeah, and is it just the Idaho is known for the russet potato, right? Because I'm trying to think, are Yukon Gold potatoes
Huh.
also from Idaho? I don't know.
That's too bad because that's what Idaho is known for. So if they're only limited to one type of potato, it's got to change your view on it a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really makes me question Idaho's role as the potato capital of the United States. Now, it's probably multiple types of potatoes, and as we know, different potatoes for different applications. If you are going to have baked potato, you typically want to go with a russet potato. If you're making home fries, or Spanish tortilla, I tend to go with a potato more like the Yukon Gold or yellow potatoes. If you're making potato salad, though, Pat, I think you'll agree that you might go with the red bliss potato, for
Yes.
example. And it really would be a shame if there were not as many
Th-
varieties of potato.
This
I
is
clearly don't
how
know what
come
I'm talking
the
about.
Irish potato famine happened, right? Because they didn't diversify their potatoes. You have to do the same thing with cooking.
Oh, is that true? I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
a disease
I thought,
targeted one type of potato and took out the whole crop.
oh, I would have guessed that even different types of potatoes generally need the same conditions and would be susceptible to the same stuff, but maybe not. Anyway, yes, Idaho. And when you did your crazy road trip extravaganza that involved I'm sorry, what is the name? Soylent drink.
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot the name of that. And the entire thing. You were in some places where you could really get great views of the night sky, right?
Yeah, I mean, Badlands National Park, beautiful view of the night sky there. And what's funny was it wasn't too far away from a city. The Rapid City was maybe 100, 150 miles away. And even though they maybe have a population of 100,000, 200,000 people, that night sky out in the Badlands was the clearest I've ever seen. I just couldn't keep my eyes off of it.
Well, 150 miles is quite a bit. I mean, I think that even like 25 miles outside of Boston, you can find some spots where you can better see the sky. But 150, that
Yeah,
must be pretty amazing.
but the sky was unreal. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. I've never seen
Yeah.
so many stars.
It was so unreal that you were distracted when a bison walked right up to you.
Yes, yes.
Okay, a woman was mistaken for a deer and shot. Rosemary Bilquist worked later than usual a day last week, and when she got home in Western New York, it was dark. Normally, it's not dark, and she decided to walk her dogs later than she usually does. Her husband stayed home. 15 or 20 minutes later, the dogs came back without her, and they were barking with what the husband described as urgency. And husband tried to call his wife, looked up and saw an ambulance coming into view, and found out from the medic that there had been a shooting. The shooting victim was his wife. The 43-year-old woman was walking the dogs when a neighbor thought he saw a deer in a field and fired a single-shot pistol. He heard a scream, ran the 200 yards, and found Ms. Bilquist with a gunshot wound, called 911 and applied pressure to the wound until medical help arrived. She was pronounced dead at a hospital in Erie, Pennsylvania. So, will there be charges in this horrible incident? The shooter fired the pistol after sunset, and it is illegal to hunt after sunset, or at least to hunt deer after sunset. So that's number one problem. But no charges have been filed as of yet. There have to be charges filed here, right, Pat? I mean,
Yeah.
you can't chalk this up as one of these accidents where no charges is filed.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, after hearing the woman scream, went out and helped her and answered the phone calls and everything and cooperated with authorities. But his action of shooting the gun when he shouldn't have and not in a careful capacity directly led to her death. So does it sound like involuntary manslaughter to you? It certainly does to me. And at the
It
very
does.
least, he should be, penalized for shooting after dark, right?
At minimum, He should be penalized for shooting after dark. Even if it were a deer, that would be against the law. But he did not confirm that it was a deer. He saw something move in the dark and shot in that direction. And that is a negligent use of a firearm. There's no doubt about it. And I have a real problem. You can say whatever you want about what the laws should be, but I have a real problem with the fact that the laws as written are also often never enforced. And this is an example of that. And we have a legal infrastructure here to say this was a negligent discharge of a firearm. It was an irresponsible use of a firearm. And as you're pointing out, Pat, he was shooting at what he believed to be a deer after dark, which is against the law in and of itself. We're just not seeing these laws actually carried out. And people like this individual too often are going with absolutely no fine or penalty whatsoever. And it's just got to stop.
Yeah, and I think this debunks this whole idea that guns don't kill people, only people kill people, because that phrase kind of removes any sort of possibility that accidents can happen, because people are going to make mistakes, and this mistake resulted in this woman dying.
Yeah, and every time I hear guns don't kill people, people kill people, I think yes, and the more deadly the guns, the more people that people can kill. And yes, accidentally discharging a firearm has a much greater potential risk than accidentally or negligently using a knife to cut something. You're not going to accidentally kill someone from 200 yards away with a knife because you thought that there was a deer in the woods. And this is yet another one of those examples. And that talking point is just so tired that I'm quite frankly disgusted with it.
I wonder if there will be any victim blaming with this. I mean, maybe the woman should have been wearing bright orange and would have known that, hunters are commonly here. And maybe you shouldn't walk your dogs in the woods around this part of town. Oh,
it's completely her fault. She should have. She shouldn't have a job where you might get home late. I mean, that's certainly her fault. She should have been wearing a lighted, bulletproof hunter's vest in bright orange with multiple lights on the front and back. She should have had some kind of audible recording playing saying, "I am a human, not a deer. Please don't shoot." I mean, she did everything wrong here, Pat.
You got it right.
Yeah. Okay. Tomorrow, actually. I think I can even mention this today. Calendar sales have started at davidpakman.com/calendar18. Okay. The 2018 calendar is arguably the best calendar we've ever had. For members, there are two options. You can either restart your membership for a year and then you'll get the calendar for free. And this year, all calendars sold with memberships come autographed at no extra cost. You can also buy just the calendar, and there's a member discount code, which I haven't created it, but let's think of it now, Pat, so I can create it and it'll be ready for people by the time that they hear the podcast. Maybe the calendar discount for members will be, well, let's just keep it simple. Let's make it member calendar 18. Okay. If you use the coupon code member calendar 18, you will get a members only discount off of the calendar. And I'll even make a note of that.
I do have a tough time spelling the word calendar.
Well,
E and then the A, right?
Hopefully yes. Well, it's A, E, and then A.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully our audience doesn't have that problem. Member calendar 18, you can get a members only discount. International shipping is extra. International shipping is actually really high on the calendars. I think it's up to like $14 or $16 to ship calendars overseas. It's insane what it is costing. But in any case, calendars are available. I'd love to sell 250 of them. Last year, I think we did about 200. So it's available. davidpakman.com/calendar18. You can also find just the calendar under our shop on the website. So yeah, I'm excited. And tomorrow on the show, we'll put up some of the graphics from it. Very, very big time stuff. I will be back in studio tomorrow, and I will speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.